Mark Voyger, who's a senior fellow with the Center for European Analysis, also director of the master's program in global management at American University Kiev, but he actually joins us from Warsaw. Thanks so much indeed for your time, Mark. Have you been able to fully understand, comprehend, digest and analyze exactly what happened in those 24, 36 hours from Friday into Saturday and that rebellion that never happened?
No, thank you for having me, and good afternoon. Always a pleasure. I'm sure many of the details are still classified. We may never see the full story, but the bottom line is this. At this point, the internal conflict between the Minister of Defense of Russia, Shoigu, and the Chief of General Staff, Gerasimov, and Prigozhin seems to have ended with obviously Prigozhin being ousted with the mediation of Lukashenko, ousted out of Russia, and apparently he's being hosted in Belarus. So this has several important consequences. It remains to be seen, first, whether the remaining Wagner forces in Russia will actually continue as they are. It seems that they're being disarmed, at least their heavy weapons are being taken from them. The Russian military will try to incorporate them into their force structure. I think it's easier said than done. It's difficult to see who will actually be able to control those battle-hardened mercenaries, many of them criminals, murderers, people with serious criminal offenses. Also, it has consequences for Belarus. I mean, hosting a formation which numbers at least half of the Belarusian army. The Belarusian armed forces officially have about 62,000 troops. Here we're talking about 25, maybe up to 50, according to the British intelligence. So imagine hosting such a massive effectively army, a mercenary army on your territory. And herein comes the third major consequence and corollary. What if Lukashenko and Putin try to use these forces against a NATO nation? Of course, they would not dare openly attack a neighboring nation such as Poland or the Baltic states. However, their preferred modus operandi has always been the so-called hybrid warfare, that is sub-threshold attacks. That is attacks that can be be denied. The plausible deniability that's provided by the mercenaries, whether it's in Eastern Europe, whether it's in Africa, or in Syria. So the real question is, of course, not that they were going to roll down with heavy armor and tanks against Vilnius or Warsaw at this point. Obviously, they don't have this equipment, but there may be cross-border attacks, subversive attacks, special forces of this nature, attacks against infrastructure that then both Lukashenko and Putin can try to disassociate from. So this is the real danger, in my opinion, these surreptitious hybrid warfare type attacks against a NATO nation. And it seems that for Lukashenko, keeping such a force, as I said, will be a real challenge. I mean, he's paranoid as much as Putin is. What if they turn against him? So, we still, of course, don't know which way this will go, but NATO must be ready. And as we can see from what you've just shown, both the NATO leadership and the leadership of the neighboring states, Poland, Lithuania, have adopted this proactive attitude, and they're getting ready for all eventualities.
Mark, do you think that internally there are still going to be some changes in the Russian leadership, whether it's political or whether it's military? And
that's a great
kind of instability, how much danger does that pose? You see, and again, I'm going back to Friday and Saturday, because most of the world couldn't understand why Yevgeny Prigozhin, already having made the decision that basically put his life and those of his Wagner mercenaries in danger to start that march to Moscow, suddenly a few hours later said, don't do it. The New York Times has reported that Sergei Sorovikin, the deputy commander of Russian operations in Ukraine, actually knew about Prigozhin's planned rebellion. And possibly there could be other senior figures who may have known. So will there be a purge, and how dangerous would that be for stability inside Russia?
Putin will absolutely have to deal with those implicated with potentially supporting Prigozhin. Maybe Sorovikin, maybe others. So, yes, it's difficult to imagine that he would launch such a daring attack on the heartland of the Russian Federation without thinking, without expecting or hoping that others will help him. And as we saw, the regular army did nothing really to stop him, other than obviously trying some Air Force attacks. And then the national Russian Guard, the Rosgvardia, the 250,000 strong Russian Praetorian Guard, if you put it this way, that was supposed to crack skulls to protect Putin, they actually didn't also intervene. So many difficult questions that Putin would have to resolve. And of course, if he's unable to do so, if he only adopts half measures and keeps many of those people around him, I'm sure there will be other attempts of similar nature. Others will take notice and will figure out, well, why don't we build our own mercenary army, or well, why don't we try our own coup? The question is that Putin, of course, is not Stalin. I mean, so far he hasn't been overly keen to physically destroy members of his immediate entourage. Yes, he has directed the assassination of former spies in the UK and elsewhere, but no one of that magnitude. So by the severity of the purge that he conducts or does not, we will know to what extent he feels stable within the Russian system. If he doesn't, then that means that the regime that he has so carefully built over the last almost quarter of a century is doomed to fail in the coming months, years. Russia may collapse under the burden of what Putin has done domestically and internationally. So the coming days and weeks are critical in that matter.
Mark Voyger, thank you so much indeed for the analysis. Really interesting to hear from you. Take care.